Well, good morning. It's great to be with you today. Today we are week 3 of our series called I Have Come To. And in the lead up to Easter, this Lent period, what we're doing is we're looking at some of the statements that Jesus made throughout the Gospels around his purpose, why he has come. And in the first week, we looked at this idea, Mick looked at this idea that Jesus came to announce and to demonstrate good news, to announce and to demonstrate good news. And last week, Mike looked at this idea that Jesus came to seek and to save the lost, and he called us back to remember our own sense of lostness, and then to be encouraged to how do we speak and share Jesus with those who don't yet know him, so that they can be found in him. And today, we're going to have a little bit of fun, because we're going to look at one of the most difficult sayings of Jesus today, one of the most challenging ones today. And I wonder if you've ever found yourself in Scripture and you're kind of reading along, and then all of a sudden you hit a verse or a passage and it just feels like a punch to the gut. Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today, and that's kind of the feeling as we go through today's passage and look at the verse that we are going to look at, because we have this shock when we read this, and sometimes you might find these times and these passages and you go, what is that actually doing here? How do I make sense of this? And if you're honest, you might actually hope that these verses like this aren't actually in the Bible. So that's where we're at today, and the passage that we're going to look at today is found in Matthew chapter 10, 34 through to 37. And that's what we're going to unpack today. But to help us understand and to live out what Jesus is saying, we need to look at the context of this passage. So we kind of need to begin at the beginning of Matthew 10, and we're going to start in verse 5, and then we're going to kind of make our way through, jump a few passages along the way, but hopefully just to give us some context around what is happening and where these verses find themselves, because that will help us to make sense of some of the difficult passages that we find and the one that we see here. So just a quick context. Here we see Jesus instructing and sending out his 12 closest followers to replicate his ministry and his mission in the world. And he's teaching them this. He's teaching them how he wants his disciples to respond and to relate with people around him. So Matthew 10 verses 5, and he's just named the 12 disciples, and this is what he goes on to say. So Matthew 10 verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you've received, freely give. And then jump into verse 16. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. On my account you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say. For it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. And to verse 26. So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than any sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. And here's the verse that we're going to be looking at mainly today, verse 34. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Now, I don't know about you, but if Jesus was standing physically right here now, and he was to ask me a question, Dan, do you think I've come to bring peace to the earth? I don't know about you, but at least my response would be, well, yes, Jesus, yes, I do think that you have come to bring peace to the earth. And this is likely and possibly you're thinking too that yes, you would say that Jesus come to bring peace to the earth. And the reasons why I would say that is because in Isaiah, we're told the prophet prophesies that Jesus, you would be the one who would be the Prince of Peace, and it goes on and he says that there would be no end to the peace that you would bring. And then, of course, at Christmas time, the lead up to Christmas, we sing carols that talk about peace on earth, and we hear the Christmas story, the narrative of the angels, and what do they announce? They announce peace on earth when they relate it to your birth, Jesus. And then, of course, we see Jesus himself gives a beautiful promise that he has come to leave his peace with us. And so I'd say, Jesus, you said that you'd leave your peace with us. Verse 27 of John, it says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. So with all of these texts, it's clear that one of the purposes of Jesus was to bring peace to the earth. And so it's a jarring thing when we read verse 34, where Jesus says, do you think that I've come to bring peace? I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. And if that's not difficult enough, he goes on and he says, for I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. So what's going on? Is Jesus confused about who he is and why he has come? Well, let's look a little further, because while this is one of the more difficult sayings of Jesus, and we may actually prefer to skip over it, it is important that we understand what Jesus is saying, because the implications for our discipleship to him and the way that we engage with those around, those who are not yet followers of Jesus, is important that we understand this. Jesus says, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Let's just look at this idea. Now, to be clear, when Jesus says sword here, he doesn't mean that he has come to start wars. This is not a verse to be used to suggest that Jesus brings violence or that he encourages his followers to incite violence. The image of a sword is less of a purpose statement and more a statement of outcome or result. You see, a sword, what does a sword do? A sword cuts things in half. And so he's actually saying that the good news of the gospel, when preached and lived out, will actually bring about separation and division. In other words, Jesus' call to trust him will cause division and conflict, both among people and within people. And this shouldn't really surprise us, because when you put your trust in Jesus, you are no longer like the rest of humanity. Followers of Jesus belong to a different king and a different kingdom, and it is this distinction that is the cause of division. Paul says it like this, speaking about our change from one kingdom into another. In Colossians 1:13, he says, for he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. So we've been transferred from one kingdom into another kingdom. And then when Jesus was dedicated by Simeon, Simeon prophesied these words over him. This child is destined to cause the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed. And then in verse 35, Jesus shows us again how this separation, how this division will play out. And he understood that the immediate effect of the cross and the change that it would bring to those who believed would bring division even between family, even between those that we love. A man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Now here's the thing, for some of us, we understand Jesus' words concerning division in the family all too well. For some, when you trusted Jesus, this meant that some members of your own family didn't understand you. Maybe you were even said to be an embarrassment or encouraged to not continue in your faith and discouraged from going to church or being involved in youth group or something like that. For others, when you put your trust in Jesus, it upset your parents, your relatives, maybe even your husband or your wife, because your commitment to Jesus demanded your time and your attention. For others, sadly, you loved and raised your kids to know and follow Jesus, but they are not currently following him like you are, and this is a cause for great pain and hurt for you and puts great strain on family dynamics and relationships. Or perhaps you want to follow Jesus, but you haven't said yes to him yet because you are actually afraid of how your family, how your friends, how your relatives will actually treat you if you do. So this is a real challenge, and sadly, many of you understand this challenge. Family division is especially real in many nations around our world, particularly where people coming to faith in Jesus from an Islamic background. As a movement, Baptist Mission Australia is our Baptist global mission movement, and they send people from Australia to various least reached people groups around the globe, and to help to contextualize the good news and the gospel in those places to see disciples made. And the number of stories that we hear of this type of division taking place. And I wanted to share with you just one of those as well, a story of a lady named Anne. And Anne came in contact with one of the team that are working from Baptist Mission Australia in Southeast Asia. And this team of missionaries in Southeast Asia have started a business which is about teaching English and helping other people to learn English, and so it employs different teachers, and it's a great and a real significant ministry. But Anne came in contact, and she walked past a sign advertising jobs for English language teachers. And so she responded to the ad, and she got a job with the Southeast Asian Baptist Mission Australia team who runs a teaching English business. She was a Muslim, but as she worked with the team, she began to show interest in the other activities that were happening around her. She became aware of a small Bible study that was being held where she worked. She wasn't interested, and she decided that she would join a Bible study. She became interested in what was being studied, and eventually she put her trust in Jesus and became a follower of Jesus. Anne was pregnant with her first child at the time, and her husband was not a believer. Over time, as people in her community came to find out that she was now a follower of Jesus, the landlord raised the rent on their home so substantially that it pushed them out of that house because they could no longer afford the rent. Her family and the local community turned their backs on her, and her family forced them out of the community, and they had to relocate away from family and friends in another town. To this day, their family and friends are unaware even of where Anne lives. Anne continues to share her faith, but is very cautious about who she shares with and how she shares. Eventually, Anne's husband also became a follower of Jesus. Anne continues to work with the organisation, but it has cost her much in terms of her relationship with family and friends, as well as the relationship between her daughter and her grandparents and uncles and aunts, etc. And it's interesting that in Southeast Asia, every citizen too has an ID card and their faith is actually stamped on it. And this means that your whole life is lived within the structures of your identified faith. And so it's a very difficult thing to change your faith, because it's not just about changing which building you worship in, but you need to go through the proper government channels to have your ID card changed. So this is something that cannot be done in secret. So this is just one story of what Jesus is saying when he speaks about not coming to bring peace, but coming to bring a sword. And then Jesus goes on, he kind of doubles down now on this. And in verse 37, he speaks to the high commitment and the cost of following him. He demands something of his followers that not even the rabbis demanded of their followers. He says this, verse 37, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Now, Jesus says the same thing in what seems like a much harsher way in Luke 14:26. He says it this way. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even hate their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Does Jesus really mean we are to hate our family, our partner, our husband, our wife, our children, our father, our mother? Well, not exactly. He's talking here about priorities, and he's making some remarkable and radical claims. He is saying that what matters most is allegiance to him. It's allegiance to him. He is saying, I am worthy of greater affection, greater love, greater allegiance than any member of your family. This is a high commitment. This is a high demand. He's saying, you must love me more than your family, more than self, more than life itself. He's saying, if you love your mother or father more than me, you are not worthy of me. Now, this idea of more than me, I think, is actually a better way for us to understand what Jesus is saying, because he is saying that we are to love our family, right? But he's just saying that if we love them more than him, then that's where we get things upside down, and he's not our number one allegiance. I think it's so a helpful way for us to understand this is to think about the idols of our heart. And Tim Keller says it this way. He says this when he speaks about idols. He says, our hearts are idol-making factories that make good gifts from God ultimate in our lives, thereby replacing God in our affections. What is an idol? It is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. Church, there are rivals warring for your heart, but your love for Jesus must defeat every one of them. This is what Jesus is saying. Jesus is claiming priority even over your family relationships. Let's be honest. Our commitment to family can supplant our commitment to Jesus, can't it? Even good things like our family can become an idol that steals our affections and steals our allegiance to Jesus. So let me just ask a few questions here. I wonder, where might you be putting your family before Jesus? Where might your family be placed higher than Jesus? I wonder, has your family or your partner become an idol? Have your kids become an idol? Have your siblings become an idol? What might you need to change in your relationships and home to give allegiance first and foremost to Jesus? What might need to change at home and in your relationship so that Jesus is center, front and center in your life? Now, just to be clear, this is important that I say this. Loving Jesus more than your family doesn't mean neglecting your family, okay? Some misguidedly use this passage and passages like this to justify neglecting their own family and spending all their time on the Lord's work. This is a tough and a radical teaching here, there's no doubt about it. And it could well sound like Jesus has little care for your family, for your kids, for your partner. In reality, though, this is not true. It doesn't mean that you sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry or doing the Lord's work. And this can be a real temptation, whether you're in paid ministry or you're not. Because sometimes it is easier to do God's work than it is to love and show up well for your family. But Jesus is saying, by loving me more than your family, you are actually supremely valuing your family. You see, you cannot love your family well or give them the attention they need if you are not loving Jesus more. It's like on a flight when, in the case of an emergency, you're told to put on your own oxygen mask before you help others. That's the idea here. You see, and here's what I've learned. Our love for our family is in direct proportion to the depth of our love for Jesus. Loving Jesus first means that we will love our family better. If you want to love your family better, if you want to love your husband and your wife better, love Jesus more. Love Jesus more. Now, as we saw earlier, the context of this passage is Jesus sending out the 12 disciples to replicate his mission and his ministry in the world. Living God's mission will test your absolute allegiance and affections to Jesus. And it will divide more than just family relationships. We will actually be at odds with the world too. You see, even with Jesus' loving, gracious and inclusive approach, Jesus caused division, and this will be true for his followers and you and I too. Take a look at verse 17 to 18. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings and witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. We need to be on guard. We should not be under any illusions. Living God's mission requires living faithfully as his ambassadors. It requires a costly loyalty. Christianity, you see, is not just an add-on. It's not just a tweak here or there to the way that we live. It is not just a type of religious experience. Remember, it is a taking from one kingdom to a whole another kingdom. It's not something that might just bring some more value or enhance your lifestyle. It is a complete reordering of our lives around the person of Jesus and his kingdom. And as we live faithfully this way, the result will be that we will be at odds and we'll find ourselves at odds with the world. And this is why in verse 16, Jesus calls us to be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent or as gentle as doves as we live out God's mission. Take a look. This is in the Message translation. Stay alert. This is hazardous work I'm assigning you. You're going to be like sheep running through a wolf pack. So don't call attention to yourselves. Be as shrewd as a snake and inoffensive as a dove. You see, living God's mission, this is what Paul knows, and this is what Paul wants you and I to know, is that living God's mission faithfully involves us balancing both boldness and sensitivity. Boldness and sensitivity. We share Jesus boldly. We don't shy away from our allegiance to Jesus, but we do it sensitively. We do it with gentleness and respect. And we've looked at this passage before where Jesus says, set apart, in 1 Peter, set apart Christ as Lord. But do all things with gentleness and respect. And so as we close, I want to just look at this little 2x2 grid, which has been as part of a course that myself and our Agrippa Huddle guys that we're looking at and we're going through, and it's been put together by John Tyson and Tyler Preeb. And it's a 2x2 grid that actually maps this idea of sensitivity and boldness, this idea of how it is that we can live with great conviction, but also gentleness and respect, and how we can go out into the world as shrewd as snakes and as inoffensive as doves. And he draws this up and he says if there's high sensitivity and high boldness, and then it's then low sensitivity and low boldness, you can see it on the screen. So I wonder, when you think about your combination of boldness and sensitivity, where might you be? Which quadrant are you located in? What are your tendencies? If you're all low sensitivity and low boldness, then it's an irrelevant faith, really. If you're low sensitivity and boldness, so then that can be offensive. If you're high sensitivity, so you're more concerned about the way and the tone in which you share, but you're not bold and courageous in terms of how you share, then that's a compromised position. But an ambassador of Jesus, one who lives and reflects Jesus, his words, his ways and his works into our world, to live as an ambassador of Jesus is one who is highly sensitive in how they share, but also high boldness and courage, and that's the ambassador quadrant. Of course, that's where we all want to live. But I wonder, which quadrant are you located in, and what are your tendencies? It's my feel that for most of us, probably, we find ourselves in the low boldness, high sensitivity area, so as to not to cause offence and to offend and cause division. The trouble with this is that we are living compromised lives and not living as ambassadors of Jesus with high boldness and high sensitivity. So, this Easter, this week, will we be a people who will live with boldness and sensitivity? Will we be a people who live unafraid? Let us be people who don't let the fear of division cause us to compromise our beliefs. We can trust that God is with us. None of this is to be unexpected, and that's why Jesus is sharing this with his disciples. And in verse 26 to 31, Jesus gives us this beautiful encouragement. Have a look, he says, "So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." So do not be afraid of them. "What I tell you in the dark," listen to this, "speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." I love verse 27. "What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs." Church, God has whispered in our ears the most amazing news that this world has ever heard, and the most amazing news that this world needs to know. Let us not be afraid. We are more worth and more value than many sparrows. Let us go and share the news with boldness and with sensitivity, knowing that Jesus is the center of it all, and that there will be division that results. So I wonder, in these weeks leading up to Easter, if we could all just talk about Jesus more and live out the life of the kingdom for those who we encounter. You see, here's the thing. You are uniquely placed in a sphere of influence in your family, in your workplace, in your school, in your sporting club. And we've all been called to live as ambassadors of Jesus, representatives of him in those fields. So, just take a moment right now and think of a couple of people who you know who don't yet know Jesus. Write their names down. Put them into your phone. Lay them on your heart, at least. And then every day in the lead up to Easter, let's pray that their hearts would open, that God would open up opportunities for you, for someone else to be able to share the good news, and that we would have the courage to do it. Let me come and pray. God, we thank you for Jesus. We thank you that he has come. We thank you that the gospel is a beautiful thing. But Lord, we also recognize that the gospel, the person of Jesus, is like a dividing line. And that division and conflict is caused around him. And Lord, for some of us who are listening today, this is real for us. This is our lived experience, and it's tough and it's challenging for all sorts of ways. And so, Jesus, I pray that for those people who this is raw and real for them, that they would experience a special just touch of your love and care for them at this time. And would you also just continue to fill them with hope, and would you fill them with courage, and would you fill them with boldness and continual sensitivity as they seek to live for you and to live out and share the good news of your gospel as well. And Lord, I pray for each of us that we would be recaptured by your love and your beauty, and that our affections would be focused solely on you, and that our allegiance would be solely unto you, I pray. May we love you well so that we can love our family well. And Lord, I pray that for each of us, we would be those who would, in faith and through your Spirit, if we find ourselves in that compromised quadrant or any of the other three around offensiveness or irrelevance, that you by your Spirit would enable us to take a step closer towards living as an ambassador of you, one that lives with high sensitivity and high boldness. May we be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves as we share. So thank you for today. Thank you for this difficult saying. But I pray that by your Spirit you would continue to unpack it in our hearts and in our lives today. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.